There is a world beneath our feet, frozen to a depth of 1.5 kilometers, a world as hard as granite, as cold as interstellar space. This is a land that has not felt the warmth of the sun, nor breathed the oxygen of our modern atmosphere for hundreds of thousands of years. We gave it a name that offered a treacherous sense of security: permafrost. The very word, permanent, was a promise we believed. We saw it as the planet's most reliable vault, a cryogenic prison for anything that fell into its grasp. We were certain that ancient bacteria, primordial viruses, the carcasses of extinct beasts, and gigatons of greenhouse gases were locked away forever, the keys thrown into an ocean of time. Upon this frozen foundation, we built cities. Across its unyielding surface, we laid strategic pipelines. We were convinced the northern Sphinx would sleep for eternity. We were fatally wrong. The Sphinx has awakened. In the heart of eastern Siberia, a geological catastrophe of biblical proportions is unfolding. Locals speak of it with a superstitious dread, calling it the gateway to the underworld. Here, the earth has split open. A gargantuan chasm, a wound from the blow of some cosmic hammer, grows at a terrifying, inexorable pace. It is swallowing the taiga whole, devouring century-old forests, roads, and sacred hills. But the horror is not that the ground is collapsing into the abyss. The true horror is what is emerging from it. From the black, fetid, thawing mud, shadows of the deep past are rising. Ancient pathogens for which we have no immunity, antagonists our species has not encountered for tens of thousands of years, are stirring. In 2016, on the Yamal Peninsula, this nightmare became reality. An unprecedented heatwave melted the ice, and the spores of a killer that had slept for 75 years returned to the surface. Anthrax. It claimed the life of a child, hospitalized dozens, and decimated entire herds of reindeer. But that was only a rehearsal, a warning shot fired by a planet under siege. Now, scientists descend into the maw of the Batagaika crater, listening to the sharp crack of tearing roots and the rush of subterranean rivers washing the bones of mammoths from their frozen tombs. In sterile laboratories, they work to resurrect a past we can barely comprehend, attempting to clone an ancient horse from liquid blood found in its 42,000-year-old remains. Under the gaze of electron microscopes, giant viruses, survivors of 30,000 years of absolute darkness, are reanimated, their capacity to kill perfectly preserved. The Great Thaw is not merely a geological event, it is an unraveling of time itself. The cryogenic prison was never locked. Its bars were merely made of ice, and now they are melting. The past is seeping into our present, and we are standing at the threshold of an age where the ghosts of a forgotten world are returning to reclaim their own. It does not herald a new spring, but a biological threat of planetary scale. Our investigation begins at a precise point on the globe, 67 degrees north latitude. This is the Verkhoyansky district of Siberia, one of the coldest inhabited places on Earth, the pole of cold for the entire northern hemisphere. Here, winter temperatures plummet to -60 degrees Celsius. In the stillness, the very air crystallizes into a fine, icy dust, and steel becomes as brittle as glass.
Wait, this is not the full story. The most important part is just begin.
But in the summer, something is happening here that defies geological convention. Amidst the endless green expanse of the larch taiga, a wound gapes in the earth. Satellite imagery reveals an object resembling a colossal tadpole, or perhaps a stingray, burrowing deep into the planet's crust. This is no meteorite impact crater. It is not the throat of a dormant volcano. It is a thermokarst depression, a mega slump, the largest of its kind on the planet. Its official designation is the Batagaika crater. The local Yakut people know it by a simpler, more chilling name: the gateway to the Underworld. They have profound reasons for this. The scale of this monster beggars the imagination. It is 1 kilometer in length, 800 meters in width. Its depth is nearly 100 meters, the full height of a 30-story skyscraper swallowed whole by the ground. To stand at its precipice is to gaze into an open book of Earth's history, its exposed layers of soil revealing a timeline stretching back 200,000 years. But this book is burning. It began with a human error, a butterfly effect. In the 1960s, a section of the forest here was cleared for industrial purposes. It was a routine, unremarkable act of logging. No one considered the consequences. The trees had provided shade, their canopy a shield protecting the ground from the direct summer sun. Their roots, a natural rebar, held the soil together. When the forest vanished, the merciless northern sun began to warm the darkened earth. The permafrost that had lain dormant since the time of woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats, a vast subterranean deposit known as the Yedoma ice complex, began to thaw. The soil lost its foundation. The ground subsided. At first, it was just a small, innocuous gully. But the process ignited an irreversible chain reaction. Today, the crater walls collapse daily. Standing at the edge, one can hear it. A low, guttural rumble emanates from deep within the earth. It is punctuated by the sharp crack of ancient larch trunks, centuries old, as they topple into the Abar. In warmer years, even scientists descending to its floor, clad in specialized protective suits and respirators, are met with a specific odor. It is a heavy, cloying scent of decay and methane, the rot of organic matter, flash frozen for millennia. Pleistocene flora, animal carcasses, ancient dung, all thawing and releasing their gases into our modern atmosphere. But with this scent, witnesses to a lost world emerge from the thawing walls. The tusks of mammoths jut from entire carcasses of ancient bison, their forms still intact, lie preserved in the mud. For paleontologists, this is El Dorado. For climatologists, it is a catastrophe in motion. Yet for virologists, this is a biological hazard of the highest order. The thawing ground is not just releasing methane, it is unlocking a microbial world that has been in cryostasis for eons, ancient viruses and bacteria for which modern life has no immunity. The gateway to the underworld is not just a geological spectacle, it is a Pandora's box, opened by a single, short-sighted act. We have broken the seal on a world long forgotten, and its ancient breath is now mingling with our own. The summer of 2016 descended upon the Yamal Peninsula not as a season, but as a fever. This finger of land, reaching into the Kara Sea, is a place accustomed to the bite of an icy wind, a landscape defined by its resistance to warmth. But that year, an anomalous, suffocating heat settled over the tundra. The air, usually a crisp breath from the Arctic, thickened. Temperatures climbed to an unthinkable 35 degrees Celsius in the shade. For this world of lichen and low-slung birch, it was the heat of a blast furnace. Beneath the surface, a process millennia in the making began to accelerate. The permafrost, the frozen ground that is the very bedrock of this ecosystem, was in retreat. Its active layer, the shallow skin that thaws each summer, normally surrenders no more than 50 centimeters. but under the relentless sun, the thaw plunged deeper.
Wait, this is not the full story. The most important part is just beginning, and it changes everything we thought we knew.
A meter, 1.5, 2. The land was unlocking secrets it had held for generations, and from the softening earth, something buried in 1941 began to emerge. It was an old, forgotten cemetery of the reindeer. In the 1940s, an epidemic had swept through the herds. The animals that succumbed were not given deep graves. In the iron-hard permafrost, digging is an act of war requiring dynamite. Instead, the carcasses were simply covered with snow and a thin layer of soil. The nomadic peoples marked the place with wooden stakes, long since rotted into the earth, and moved on. They placed their faith in the vast northern refrigerator, believing its eternal cold would neutralize the contagion forever. It was a fatal miscalculation. The agent of that long-ago plague, Bacillus anthracis, is perhaps the most tenacious survivor on Earth. When faced with inhospitable conditions, the bacterium does not die. It transforms. It retreats into a spore, a microscopic capsule protected by a multi-layered shell of protein, a structure of almost impossible resilience. Within this vessel, life enters a state of near-perfect suspension. It requires no food, no water, no air. It can sleep for centuries, waiting. It can endure boiling, withstand the sterilizing wash of ultraviolet radiation, and shrug off chemical assault. It is the planet's most perfect biological bunker. As the ancient ice melted, water and warmth seeped down to the dormant spores. After 75 years of silence, they sensed the change. They awoke. Meltwater, flowing in new rivulets across the tundra, carried them to the surface. Reindeer, grazing on the suddenly lush grasses, inhaled the spores with the dust or drank them from the pools of water. The dying began. In a matter of days, 2,300 reindeer perished. The tundra, a landscape of subtle, sweeping life, became a tableau of death, littered with the bloated, decaying bodies of the fallen herds. But the true horror was yet to unfold. The pathogen, resurrected from its icy tomb, made the leap to humans. The Nenets people, the nomadic herders whose lives are woven into the existence of the reindeer, were exposed. Dozens were evacuated by emergency helicopter to the regional capital of Salekhard. On their skin, the terrifying signature of the disease appeared: black, necrotic ulcers known as carbuncles. A 12-year-old boy, infected with the intestinal form of the illness, the most aggressive and swift, did not survive. The response was that of a nation at war. The Russian military's radiation, chemical, and biological defense troops descended on the peninsula. It was a silent, surreal conflict, fought against an invisible enemy. Figures in full hazmat gear moved through the landscape, erecting pyres of old tires and fuel to incinerate the infected carcasses at temperatures of 1,000 degrees. They drenched the violated tundra in...
Stay with me. Because what comes next has been hidden for a very long time. And only a few people know the truth behind it.
Chlorine, attempting to sterilize the very earth itself. The Yamal outbreak was more than a localized tragedy. It was a warning, a call from the dead, broadcast to the entire world. It was the first undeniable proof that the frozen north is not a graveyard where pathogens go to die. It is a waiting room. Scientists now estimate that across the vast cattle burial grounds of the Russian north, many of them unmarked on any map, lie the dormant spores of other historical terrors. Smallpox, even the bubonic plague. The permafrost is a planetary archive, and its thawing is not merely a matter of rising sea levels. It is the potential release of ancient plagues we have no living memory of, and perhaps no modern defense against. If the thaw continues at its current rate, the events of 2016 will be remembered not as a catastrophe, but as a gentle prelude to a true pandemic emerging from the past. Yet this frozen crypt does not preserve only death. In its crystalline depths, it holds life, captured in details so vivid they defy time. It holds the seeds of forgotten flora, the bodies of mammoths with their last meal still undigested, and the silent, sleeping microbes that are the architects of our world. The permafrost is not evil, it is a record, and as its pages turn before our eyes, we are forced to confront the ghosts of the planet's history, and in them, perhaps, a glimpse of our own uncertain future. In the vast, frozen expanse of Siberia, the Earth holds a library of lost worlds, a vault where the laws of entropy and biological decay are held in abeyance. Here, time itself is frozen, preserving secrets that should have long since turned to dust. It was August of 2018, deep within the ever-widening maw of the Batagaika crater, a colossal permafrost scar known to locals as the gateway to the Underworld, a strange shape was spotted. Protruding from a wall of ancient ice and soil in a remote, almost inaccessible. A team from the Mammoth Museum of the Northeastern Federal University in Yakutsk, led by the esteemed researcher Semyon Grigoriev, was dispatched to the site. With the patient precision of archaeologists, they began to clear away the frozen earth. Using delicate brushes, they gently swept away millennia of sediment, and as the form was revealed, they froze in silent astonishment. Before them lay a foal, a perfect tiny horse from an extinct species, Equus lenensis, the leaner horse. It was a creature of the Ice Age, no more than 2 weeks old when it died. Yet it looked as though it had perished only yesterday, having simply lain down for a nap in the shade of a Pleistocene afternoon. Its russet-colored fur, its minuscule hooves, its tail, mane, and ears, even the long, delicate eyelashes framing its closed eyes, were all immaculately preserved. There was no hint of decay, no scent of putrefaction. Radiocarbon dating would later return a staggering figure: 42,770 years. This tiny creature had galloped across the Yakutian steppe at a time when Neanderthals still walked the valleys of Europe, and the great pyramids of Giza were not yet even a dream. But the true revelation, the discovery that would send a tremor through the global scientific community, unfolded later under the sterile lights of a laboratory operating room. During the necropsy, as a surgeon's scalpel made a careful incision into the heart muscle, something impossible happened. A liquid began to flow. It was blood. Dark, thick, yet undeniably liquid blood, which had remained in that state for over 42,000 years. This was a scientific shock. Over such vast timescales, blood is meant to coagulate, to dry out, to be consumed by bacteria until nothing remains. But the foal's final moments had created a perfect time capsule. It had stumbled into a pit of liquid mud which flash froze around its body, creating an anaerobic vacuum and denying oxygen to the microbes of decay. From this ancient blood, scientists were able to isolate individual red blood cells. Though their membranes were ruptured, their forms were preserved. In the foal's bladder, they discovered urine, the oldest liquid urine ever recovered. Within its intestines, they found the remnants of its mother's milk, tragically mingled with the very mud it had swallowed in its final panicked seconds, struggling to escape the mire. It was, without question, the single best-preserved Ice Age animal ever found in the history of science. The tissues were so fresh, so red and elastic, that they sparked more than just academic curiosity. They ignited serious practical conversations about resurrection. A joint Russian-South Korean research group, spearheaded by the pioneering and controversial Professor Hwang Woo-suk, the man who cloned the world's first dog, announced their intention to find a living
Stay with me. Because what comes next has been hidden for a very long time.
cell. A single fibroblast, with its nucleus and its precious cargo of DNA still whole and undamaged. If such a cell could be found, the path forward would be clear. Its nucleus could be transferred into the egg of a modern horse, which would then be implanted into a surrogate mother. After an 11-month gestation, a creature that has no right to exist could draw its first breath in our world. A living ghost of the Pleistocene. We now stand on a precipice, staring into the profound possibility of de-extinction. But as we reach back across the millennia to reclaim what was lost, we must ask ourselves if we are truly prepared. What ancient viruses, what dormant pathogens locked away for eons in that living blood might awaken with it? For after the permafrost surrendered this harmless foal, its next offerings would be far from benign. It began to release the predators. On the unforgiving banks of the Semyuliak River, in the vast and silent expanse of Yakutia, mammoth tusk hunters stumbled upon two strange grey clumps frozen into the earth. They were not rock, nor were they wood. They were time capsules, holding the ghosts of a lost world. Inside were two cave lion cubs, perfectly preserved by the eternal frost. They would be given names from our time, Spartak and Boris. Their kind, Panthera spelea, were the undisputed terrors of the Pleistocene. These were not the lions of the modern savannah. They were titans, fully 20% larger than their African relatives, built with a power suited to a harsher world. They wore no mane, a sleek and efficient silhouette designed for the hunt. Their prey was the megafauna of the Ice Age, formidable bison and the juvenile offspring of the colossal mammoths. What the hunters had found were not fossils, but mummies. Mummies of such impossible perfection they are frighteningly realistic. The illusion of life is absolute. Their whiskers, the sensitive vibrissae that once felt the cold air of their den, are still in place. One can count the individual golden hairs of their coat, a thick pelt with a dense undercoat engineered by evolution to defy the lethal cold. The pads of their paws, which never took more than a few steps, remained soft to the touch. Their claws, still sheathed, are as sharp as razors. Computer tomography peeled back the layers of time, revealing a miracle within a miracle. Their internal organs were entirely undamaged. The brain, the heart, the lungs, the stomach, each organ rests precisely where it should, a complete anatomy chart frozen for millennia. They have simply been dehydrated by sublimation, the water content turned directly to vapor, leaving behind a perfect three-dimensional echo of life. Science could even reconstruct their final moments. They died in their den, buried alive. Perhaps the ceiling of their earthen burrow collapsed under the immense weight of snow and ice. Their deaths were instantaneous. Their lungs show no signs of suffocation. Their existence was extinguished in a fraction of a second. And here the story takes a staggering turn. Analysis revealed one cub, Spartak, is approximately...
This is where things get really interesting. What you're about to hear might explain why this was never meant to be discovered.
28,000 years old. The other, Boris, is 43,000 years old. They are not brothers. They are separated by 15 millennia, a chasm of time so vast that entire human civilizations could rise and fall within it. Yet they died in the exact same manner, in the same frozen lands, and now lie upon the same examination table, 2 points in deep time converging in the present. This pristine preservation yielded its greatest secret, a flawless genome. Comparing their DNA to that of modern lions, geneticists traced the great divergence. Their lineages split some 500,000 years ago. The cave lion was a distinct species, a separate evolutionary experiment that ultimately left no descendants. It is a branch on the tree of life that was severed forever. Scientists could even analyze the contents of their stomachs, identifying the chemical signature of their mother's milk, and through it, her last meal, bison. These discoveries fundamentally change our perception of the past. We are no longer looking at the bare, sterile bones in a museum display. We are gazing upon a portrait of a living animal. We know the color of their fur, a gray, sandy hair, ancient bodies. But with this intimate glimpse into prehistory comes a profound and chilling risk. Each time scientists thaw a portion of these carcasses to take samples, they operate under the strictest of protocols. They are clad in full biological hazard suits, with autonomous air supplies, sealed against a threat unseen. For clinging to the fur of these impossibly preserved cubs could be the very bacteria and microbes of their age, pathogens that brought down mammoths and which have slumbered in the ice, waiting. They know nothing of 21st century immunity, and they may be eager to awaken in a new world. While the search for giants continues in the Siberian permafrost, another hunt is underway in the sterile laboratories of Marseille, France. At the Institute for Genomics and Bioinformatics, Professor Jean-Michel Claverie and his wife Chantal Abergel are searching for the invisible killers. Claverie is a hunter of ancient viruses. He receives core samples of permafrost, drilled from 30 meters below the surface, and asks a simple, terrifying question. What can be brought back to life? In 2014, he made a discovery that sent a shockwave through the scientific community, forcing the rewriting of virology textbooks. From a 30,000-year-old sample of ice, he isolated a living virus. But this was no ordinary microbe. It was a giant. He named it Pithovirus sibericum. In the microscopic world, it is a Godzilla. It is so enormous, it can be seen with a standard school light microscope, larger than some forms of bacteria. Its genetic complexity is staggering, containing 500 genes. For comparison, HIV possesses a mere 9, the influenza virus just 8. The thawing Earth is not merely giving up the ghosts of its past, it is opening an
Stay with me. Because what comes next has been hidden for
archive, a biological Pandora's box that has been sealed for eons. As we reach back to touch the creatures of a lost world, we are forced to wonder what exactly might be reaching back. In a sterile petri dish, under the dispassionate gaze of a laboratory microscope, a single drop of meltwater meets a colony of modern amoebas. Within that drop lies a ghost from the Pleistocene, a virus thawed from a 30,000-year slumber in the Siberian permafrost. For a moment, there is only silence. Then, the unthinkable happens. The ancient predator stirs. It awakens. With an instinct honed in a world lost to time, the virus initiates its attack. It deceives the amoeba's cellular defenses, a phantom key turning a lock that has not been tested for 300 centuries. Once inside, It sheds its frosted shell and begins the relentless work of replication. It commandeers the host's own biological machinery, transforming the living cell into a factory for its own kind, a crucible for forging an army of ancient assassins. Hours later, the process reaches its violent crescendo. The amoeba, swollen and exhausted, ruptures. It bursts, unleashing hundreds of perfect viral copies into the microcosm, each one a testament to a chilling fact. The virus was entirely, terrifyingly viable. After an eternity in absolute darkness and cold, it had not forgotten how to kill. Fortunately for humanity, this particular entity, a giant known as pithovirus, preys only upon single-celled organisms. To us, it is a harmless curiosity. But it was only the beginning. In 2015, the same research team unearthed another species, Mollivirus sibericum, also 30,000 years old, also alive, also active. Then, in 2023, they published a report on 13 more novel viruses, resurrected from the deep freeze. They were found clinging to the wool of a long-dead mammoth and dormant within the frozen intestines of a prehistoric wolf. The most ancient among them had waited for 48,000 years. The lead scientist, Jean-Michel Claverly, issued a stark warning. If these amoeba-infecting viruses can survive for so long, there is no physical or biological reason why pathogens dangerous to humankind could not do the same. Locked in the ice could be strains of smallpox, the very viruses that caused the great influenza pandemics of the past, or perhaps even unknown pathogens, plagues that tormented our Neanderthal and Denisovan cousins, specters for which we have no name and no defense. This is not speculation. In the frozen soils of Alaska and Svalbard, researchers have already found the bodies of people who perished in the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918. Within their preserved tissues, fragments of the virus's RNA code remained intact. One has to ask, what happens when industrial drilling for oil, or the explosive thawing of methane craters, breaches an ancient, unmarked burial ground containing the victims of a smallpox epidemic? Such graves litter the north, silent and forgotten. If that resurrected virus were to enter the groundwater, we could face an enemy we declared vanquished, a disease for which routine vaccinations ceased in the 1980s. An entire generation, perhaps more, now stands with no immunity. We are, in effect, unarmed before the face of the past. But if the ice holds the potential for ancient death, it also holds secrets that challenge the very definition of life itself. In 2018, a collaboration of Russian and Princeton scientists thawed soil samples taken from the fossilized burrow of an ancient ground squirrel unearthed near Siberia's Alazaya River. Within this frozen earth, they discovered nematodes, microscopic roundworms. As the ice melted and warmth returned for the first time in millennia, something miraculous occurred. The worms began to stir, they began to move, and then they began to eat. Radiocarbon analysis revealed a staggering truth. These creatures had been frozen solid for 46,000 years. They were not dead, but held in a state of profound biological suspension known as cryptobiosis. In anticipation of the killing cold, they had systematically dehydrated their own bodies, replacing the water in their cells with a natural antifreeze called trehalose.
And now comes the part no one talks about, but this is where the real mystery begins. If
And then simply stopped. They had paused their own metabolisms, falling into a sleep so deep it bordered on the absolute. They fell asleep when woolly mammoths roamed the steppe and awoke in the age of the smartphone. A subsequent genetic analysis in 2023 confirmed they belonged to a previously unknown species, now named Panagrolaemus collimeensis. This discovery represents the absolute record for anabiosis in a multicellular animal. It is definitive proof that complex organisms can place life on hold not for seasons, but for geological epochs. The thawing permafrost, then, is more than just a climate crisis. It is a vast and inscrutable archive, a library of deep time whose frozen pages we are only now beginning to turn. In one chapter, we find the spectre of forgotten plagues, a reminder of our biological fragility. In another, we find a form of near immortality that defies our understanding. The ice is a mirror, reflecting both our oldest vulnerabilities and the profound, almost unbelievable resilience of life itself. Within the thawing Siberian tundra, it is not only microscopic life that stirs from an eon of slumber. Ancient plagues, yes, but something more complex, more intimate. Parasites. The worms of the Pleistocene, encased in ice for millennia, are now poised to seek out new hosts in a world utterly unprepared for their return. But this biological menace, this reawakening of dormant disease, is merely a prelude. It is only half the story. A far greater threat is leaking from the warming soil. A chemical time bomb capable of altering the planetary climate faster and more violently than all our factories and automobiles combined. The permafrost is a vast frozen library of carbon. It is an archive of life itself, the compressed remains of plants, animals and their roots, accumulated and flash frozen over millions of years, locked away from the natural cycle of decay. As long as this world remains frozen, it is inert. The carbon is imprisoned. But as the ice recedes, it is not just viruses that awaken. An ancient hunger stirs. Methanogenic bacteria, dormant for ages, begin to stir in the sodden, thawing organic matter. A great feast commences. As these innumerable organisms devour the newly available remnants of a lost world, their digestive process releases a gas, methane. In the short-term calculus of climate science, over a 20-year timescale, methane is a greenhouse gas 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. It wraps the planet in an invisible shroud, a thermal blanket growing thicker by the day. On the peninsulas of Yamal and Taimyr, the consequences are no longer theoretical. The ground itself convulses. As the organic matter decomposes, immense volumes of methane gas accumulate deep underground, trapped beneath a thinning crust of soil and ice. The pressure builds, forming vast subterranean bubbles, pushing the surface upward into heaving mounds known as pingo. When the pressure becomes critical, the pingo detonates. With the force of an artillery shell, ice and earth are hurled hundreds of meters into the air. What remains is a perfectly circular wound in the landscape, a crater sometimes 50 meters deep. A pillar of raw methane erupts from the Earth's core, a volatile column that can, and sometimes does,
This is where things get really interesting. What you're about to hear might explain why this was never meant to be discovered.
ignite. Satellites orbiting silently above now track hundreds of these new scars pockmarking the Russian Arctic. An estimated 7,000 such methane bubbles are, at this moment, ready to explode. This is the engine of a terrifying feedback loop. The warmer the climate becomes, the more the permafrost thaws. The more it thaws, the more methane is released. The more methane that fills the atmosphere, the warmer the planet becomes. It is a cycle that, once initiated, may be impossible to stop. We may have already passed the point of no return. Scientists have a name for this mechanism, the methane cannon, or the clathrate gun. Should it fire at full strength, the Paris Agreement on Climate will become a meaningless historical document. Global temperatures could surge by 4 degrees within a few decades, transforming fertile breadbaskets into barren deserts and drowning coastal cities, turning them into the Atlantises of a new, warmer age. And yet, amidst this unfolding catastrophe, the thawing Earth offers up not only threats, but also miracles of preservation, glimpses into a world we thought was lost forever. In 2018, near the Siberian city of Yakutsk, a lump of frozen earth revealed a secret. Inside was a puppy. Analysis showed it had been there for 18,000 years. It was given the name Dogor, which in the Yakut language means friend. Its preservation was flawless. It had whiskers, eyelashes, a soft velvety nose, and a full set of sharp milk teeth. It lay curled as if in a peaceful sleep, looking as though it were merely waiting for a command to fetch. Genetic analysis was conducted at the Swedish Center for Paleogenetics, one of the world's foremost institutions of its kind. The puppy's DNA was so pristine that its entire genome was sequenced. But even with a complete genetic map, scientists could not answer the most fundamental question. What was it? Was this creature a dog, or was it still a wolf? Dogor sits perfectly balanced on an evolutionary bridge. It is a transitional link, a frozen moment in time, capturing the precise instant a dangerous predator began its journey to becoming humanity's closest companion. The ice in its retreat is giving up its ghosts. Some have come to warn us of a future we are building, a world of fire. The permafrost holds both the seeds of our potential annihilation and the keys to our deepest origins, forcing us to confront the reality that the ground beneath our feet is not merely soil, but a sleeping memory. And it is now waking up. In the frozen silence of the Siberian permafrost, a story lay dormant for 18,000 years. It is a small, almost perfectly preserved creature, its fur still soft, its whiskers and eyelashes intact. A puppy, or perhaps a wolf cub. The question of its identity hangs in the frigid air, a fundamental mystery that speaks to the very origins of our relationship with the animal kingdom. Was this one of the first canids to tentatively step across the threshold from wildness into human companionship? Or was it merely a scavenger, living on the periphery of human camps, snatching scraps but never surrendering its freedom? A clue lies locked within its stomach, a single undigested piece of meat. DNA analysis delivered a stunning revelation. The last meal this creature ever ate was not rabbit or deer, but the flesh of a woolly rhinoceros. The mind reels at the implication. Was this morsel a gift, an offering from a Pleistocene hunter to a nascent friend, a gesture of trust that would forever alter the course of two species? Or did the young animal, driven by hunger, find the carcass of the fallen behemoth on its own, only to be caught in a sudden landslide that became its tomb? This tiny, fluffy mummy is more than a specimen. It is a key, a frozen moment capturing the precise instant before humanity reshaped the natural world by taming the wolf. A moment nature itself has held in crystalline suspension for us to find. And yet, in the very same region, the Abiysky district of Yakutia, the thawing earth has surrendered a far more nightmarish relic. A local resident, Pavel Efimov, stumbled upon something that seems torn from a primeval horror. A head, a gargantuan severed wolf's head and nothing more. The body is gone. The cut at the neck is clean, not ragged. Its dimensions are simply shocking, 1.5 times the size of the head of a large modern grey wolf. From nose to occiput, it measures 40 centimeters, the scale of a fully grown African lion. It has rested in this icy crypt for 40,000 years. The preservation is miraculous, almost unsettling. Within the skull, the brain remains. The lips are pulled back in a permanent snarl, revealing a full set of fangs, immense and lethally sharp, as if ready to bite down on a world that no longer exists. But why only the head? Was it a ritual offering from ancient hunters, a trophy to commemorate the slaying of a formidable beast? Was it a totem, an object of power in a shamanic cult that revered the spirit of this colossal predator? Or is the explanation more primal? Perhaps its body was claimed by other predators in the brutal economy of the Ice Age, its head discarded and cast into a frozen crevasse. Genetic sequencing provided the answer. This was not merely an ancestor of today's wolf. It belonged to a distinct, now vanished branch of the family tree. These were giants, a specialized lineage of pack hunters that stalked the Pleistocene megafauna, the vast herds of bison, horses, and juvenile mammoths that thundered across the steppe. The wolves we know today are their diminished descendants, the survivors who adapted by turnished from the earth. What is unfolding in Siberia is not just the discovery of ancient remains, it is the greatest uncontrolled scientific experiment in human history, and simultaneously the ultimate game of Russian roulette. The Batagaika crater, a colossal gash in the taiga, continues to grow, tearing the landscape apart. It has been called the planet's thermometer, and that thermometer is indicating a raging fever. Each new discovery, a foal with liquid blood still in its veins, mummified cave lion cubs, giant viruses, and nematodes that have been reanimated after millennia, provokes a dizzying mix of scientific ecstasy among paleontologists and a cold, creeping dread among epidemiologists and climatologists. We are gaining knowledge we could have never dreamed of. We are reading the complete genetic code of extinct worlds, watching evolution in action, literally touching the past with our own hands. But the price of this knowledge may be catastrophically high. We are walking on a minefield. Beneath our feet, under a thin, fragile layer of moss and berries, lie dormant forces that once ruled this planet. Ancient bacteria capable of killing on a pandemic scale. Vast reservoirs of methane gas that could irrevocably alter our atmosphere. Viruses for which our immune systems have no memory and no defense. Siberia is thawing, and the gates it is opening, once breached, will not close on their own. The question is no longer if we will find a new plague or release a gas that could ignite the atmosphere. The question is simply when.
You think you vs everything. Wait. What comes next will turn everything upside down.
And whether we will have any time to prepare. Satellite imagery confirms our deepest fears. The Batagaika crater is not unique. There are thousands of them. The very crust of the Earth before our eyes, and we are being forced to read its lost chapters, whether we are ready for the consequences or not. The final chapter of this story has yet to be written. Its conclusion is not preordained, but is instead being forged in the crucible of our present moment. The most profound uncertainty, then, is not what this ending will be, but whether we will afford ourselves the time to read it at all.